oftentimes the Right to Life Society is associated with a particular spiritual worldview. Do you have a particular spiritual worldview?
Personally, you mean?
No, the Kelowna Right to Life Society.
Okay, well, I think as a, we have some 400 members in Kelowna, individuals and families, so I can't speak for everybody as a whole, but yes. I think for the most part, most people who do get involved in this movement are Christian people. Now, whether that be, I think it's because, essentially speaking, Christianity, people who are Christian take the view that human life is exceptional and does have a value over and above that of the animals, insects and things like that on the earth. So I think they recognize that human beings have a value, and that value ought to be respected, more so than, say, an evolutionist.
Are you aware of any, let's say, atheists or agnostics or Jews or Buddhists or Hindus and so on who belong to the group?
Yeah, well, I know one atheist for sure, and I don't think you have to even believe in God to think that taking innocent human life is wrong. So we welcome people from all different walks of life through faith, and I'm sure there are some people out there. I know Muslims are also pro-life, don't accept abortion as a practice in their culture. So I'm sure there are many people out there. Yes.
Okay. So now the pro-life movement in general believes that life begins at conception.
That's correct.
But nowadays, it seems that the whole concept of life has been blurred by things like artificial intelligence, by the recent research and experiments by Ventnor, who created life in a lab with independent chemicals. So when I hear things like this, I imagine that I ask the question, what is life? How do you guys define life?
Well, I think what we're more interested in defining is human life, when human life begins. And scientifically speaking, it's pretty well accepted across the board that a human life begins at conception. Because, in fact, I was just reading in because I'm actually expecting myself, so I was reading in one of my pregnancy books, anyways, and it was saying how, medically speaking, scientifically speaking, life begins at conception. And it wasn't a pro-life book or anything. It's just generally accepted because when sperm and ovum unite, they are no longer sperm and ovum anymore. They the clump of cells or whatever that begins is it has its own DNA. It's becomes its own entity, and so scientifically that is the time when it is no longer they're no longer two separate pieces but something completely new. So that is why we always we're proponents of life beginning at conception.
And yet I've read that the Canadian Medical Association has declared that a fetus is not a living being until it has emerged live from its mother's womb.
I believe they would say it's not a person under the law until it has emerged from its mother's womb. That it's alive, I'm sure they would certainly say it's alive. It has a beating heart. It's developing. It takes in nutrients. So it's definitely alive. I don't think anybody would argue that it isn't alive, but it's not considered a person legally under the law until it has left its mother's body.
And it's interesting, if I just might add,
yes.
The Canadian Medical Association did recently come out and support the current legislation in Canada, which defines a human being as coming into existence the moment that child is completely outside the mother's womb. That's the language of our law right now. And CMA did come out in support of that, but they did contradict their own sort of prior position where they essentially object to abortion after 20 weeks in pregnancy. So there's a little bit of contradiction there. And I think the main reason they came out in support of the law as it stands today is because they don't like the idea of criminalizing physicians. So that's where they sort of come from.
I see. And what makes them choose 20 weeks?
20 weeks. Well, yes. 20 weeks right now is largely considered a the so-called point of viability. So it's at the time where a child can be born outside the mother's body and survive, have a good chance of survival. And 20 weeks is, with technology in this day and age, 20 weeks is considered that point. Now 50 years ago, maybe it had been 32, 33 weeks, because our medical technology was not as advanced as it is today.
So does it follow then that life by the medical community is defined as according to the technology that we've created? So
well, and that's the problem. That's what makes it arbitrary. You know, essentially, if you define life at the point of viability, what you're saying is that today a 21-week-old fetus or unborn child is a human being and is living, whereas 50 years ago, that exact same 21-week unborn child was not a human being and not living, simply based on the technology that's available of that day. So that's a very problematic position to take, I think, to claim that life begins at viability.